All right, let's finish the animal trilogy with The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which came out in 1970, the first of the animal trilogy. I've been kind of going backwards. I started with Cat of Nine Tails, and I did Four Flies on Grey Velvet already, and now we're doing The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, the first film of the animal trilogy and the first film to be written and directed by Dario Argento. This is an Italian horror film, a giallo, a murder mystery that is currently streaming on Amazon Prime. So if you have Prime and you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend checking it out. And what this movie is about is a writer. I believe he's a writer. He witnesses a murder and tries to help the police solve the case. And the killer doesn't like that, this person's trying to help the police. So there's multiple assassination attempts on this guy's life. And meanwhile, he's trying to gather all kinds of facts and clues as to who the killer might be. This was my third time watch and probably my favorite watch. With a lot of Argento movies, they seem to just get better on each viewing. I've seen Deep Red a few times, Suspiria, Tenebrae, and I'm always not as high the first time. But the more I watch Argento movies, for some reason they just keep getting a little bit better, and so this one definitely bumped up in my ranking of Argento movies. And so yeah, I'm a fan. And what do I like about Bird with the Crystal Plumage? First up is the main protagonist, Sam. This writer, I thought he was, a nice, charming guy, and I liked his relationship with his girlfriend. And, she's very sexy and she's very supportive. I like how she stands up for him and tells that cop to stop harassing him. And she's the girl from Torso. And so you got good, likable characters as the lead. And even the side characters are pretty fun. They're very zany. There's always memorable, quirky little characters in Argento pictures. He's done it since the beginning. In this one, you got very wacky characters. A pimp with a stutter where he has to say so long every once in a while, otherwise he'll stutter. And there's a couple other characters. There's a artist who likes to eat cats, and he has his whole house walled up, and you can only enter his house by ladder. And there's just little characters that are just so strange. I like that the killer wasn't so predictable. They do a good job of not making it so obvious and kind of pointing your finger at someone else, and then it's revealed to be this other person. And you're like, holy shit! There's a nice little twist reveal at the end, and this starts the Argento trope of a character remembering something they saw or heard that he does in a lot of his movies, like Tenebrae and Suspiria. They always hear or see something and they forget what it was. I think they do it. He does it in Trauma also. At the very end, they're like, "That's what I saw," or "That's what I heard." It started in his first movie, and he does it in a lot of them. But it's a nice little reveal at the end, and I didn't predict who the killer was my first watch at all. Not a clue, so I like that. And the motive was not predictable either, and it's very well shot. Like some of the locations used, some gorgeous locations used in this movie, some decent atmosphere. This one has a lot more of the killer in the movie, a lot more stalking and POV. The killer has a larger presence in the film than in a couple of the other movies in this trilogy. This one has a lot more of the killer walking around, stalking and taking pictures and of his victims, or her victims, before the kills, and making the phone calls that became a trope later on with the creepy whispering voice, "I'm gonna kill you." It has that in here, and it's been done 1,000 times. But it's 1970. This is probably one of the first movies to do something like that. I thought this movie did a good job blending humor and suspense. There's some good suspense moments, especially in the third act. And there's a lot of good humor every now and then. I had a couple of good chuckles. Like I said, there's some funny side characters that made me laugh. And Ennio Morricone does the score for this movie. I think he did the score for one of the other movies in this trilogy, I believe. And it's a great score. It's like kind of a choir or some kind of soft, echoey whisper. Like, it's kind of haunting. I like it. And I thought this movie had the best pace of the trilogy. I was never bored with this one. It's not as long as Cat of Nine Tails. This one's like 95 minutes long. It's the perfect runtime, and it just has a steady pace and build up to the finale. It was never dry. I was never checking my watch with a time bar on the thing to see how many minutes were left. So it just flew by for me. The only complaints I have for this movie is, I think the biggest thing is they missed an opportunity at the end to use this piece of whatever it was. It was some wall, like, fucking piece of art, whatever it was. I don't know. Something was set up early in the movie, and they could have used that thing. They do use it, but not the way you would have wanted. They should have used that wall of spikes to kill the killer. In all these other Argento movies, the killer usually gets killed in some graphic or stylish way that's memorable, like Deep Red, Tenebrae, even Cat of Nine Tails was alright, and the end of Four Flies on Grey Velvet, the way that was shot and done, very cinematic. Like this one, you don't get that. I won't spoil exactly what happens to the killer at the end of this one, but it's not memorable. Like, there was your opportunity. They set this thing up. That could have paid off. They didn't do it. So, missed opportunity. And the kills in this movie are all off camera. They're not as stylized as some of the other ones in the Animal Trilogy. Like, this one has the weakest kills of the Animal Trilogy, easily. It just needed a little bit more style the way they were done. It's just like, they take out the knife and then it cuts away to the next scene. I didn't like how crazy the killer acted when they're revealed. The performance from this actor when they were, exposed, they just got extra crazy. They're constantly laughing and just being nuts. And it was just a little too much for me. Like, dial it down. It was just a little too hammy and over the top. I just wish it would have been played more, seriously and not so goofy and over the top. The very end of this movie is bizarre, to say the least. The way it's put together, the way it's all edited, the way the exposition is being dumped over footage of the airport and airplanes, just cut to different airplanes. Like, it's so weird. What was the decision there? I don't get it. Why couldn't they just stay on that one person talking, giving us the motivation? Why cut to this? And it was just such a weird decision. The movie, mainly all my issues are the last 5 minutes. They missed an opportunity, on killing the killer in a certain way, and then the performance from the killer when they were revealed, and then the editing and the way this exposition was handled at the very end. Just, it's a little messy at the very end. So that's where a lot of my issues are, the last 5 minutes. And there's some plot conveniences in this, a lot. Like, people are just kind of at the right place at the right time. They hear something. Certain characters seem to just know everything about everyone, and the main character forgets a detail like instantly and doesn't remember what he saw until the killer's revealed, and he's like, "Oh, that's right, that's what I saw." It's like, well, if you remembered that in the beginning, case closed. The movie would have been over. So that's just a convenience. It's a movie thing. You just gotta look past it. But yeah, there's quite a few conveniences. So final thoughts. This is, to me, the best of the Animal Trilogy. It's not as stylized as the other two, and the kills aren't as memorable, but the characters are great. Very, captivating. The mystery, it's gripping, engaging. I was hooked from beginning to end. Thought the pace was great. It was just a little messy at the final minutes. So when it comes to the bird with the crystal plumage, I'll give it 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, spoiler discussion. So this movie starts with the killer putting on their black leather gloves and playing with their little knife collection. And we hear about 3 girls already murdered at this point. And so our main character is walking by this art place, and sees these 2 people struggling, and there's a curtain that's kind of blocking the view. And what he sees here is what he remembers more clearly at the end. What he sees is a woman and a man in all black. One of them, he thinks the man's holding the knife trying to stab the woman, but of course, at the end, we find out it's the other way. The woman was holding the knife, and she was trying to stab the guy, who was just conveniently wearing all black to hide his, identity, and runs out a secret door. And how fast were the police? He gets like somehow stuck in between, one door and the other. Like he's like stuck in this little section, and then he yells at the guy outside, like, call the police. And like we see in real time, it doesn't make it look like there was like a passage of time, like this is minutes later when the cops arrive. Like he tells him go call the cops. We just see him in there for like a minute, and then here come the cops. Like how fast. They must have been like right around the corner when that guy called. So the next morning, after a long night of being interrogated, he's almost beheaded by the killer, and some old lady saves his life by, telling him to duck. And, this scene was pretty cool looking. It was like really foggy. It was a foggy morning. The atmosphere of this scene was pretty good, and it had to be the guy this time. We find out at the end that, all the women in this movie being murdered, they were murdered by the girl, but all the attempts on the guy to murder him and his girlfriend later on was the dude, the husband of this woman. I didn't write down names. So, yeah, so it's like basically there's kind of two killers in this movie, but only one of them's really killing. When he's almost getting beheaded, the wife's injured in the hospital, so it has to be the husband. And then even later on, when the girlfriend's being attacked at the apartment, you can see the sleeve goes down, and you can see that the killer has a hairy wrist. So that's definitely the husband in that scene. No question. And we meet this gay, like, salesman, and he seems to just know everything about everyone. Like, every painter, every painting in his store, he knows who painted it and where they live. When he calls later on, that guy, he's like, who painted that thing and where does he live? And he's like, oh, it was so-and-so, and he lives exactly an hour and a half away by train. Like, he knows exactly how long it would take to get to that person's house. And then, like, I love how it was so easy to get this painting from him. He's like, we don't usually let people take these paintings. And then the guy's like, well, please? And then hard cut, he has it. Like, all he had to do was say please, and this guy was able to take the painting home with him. And we find out that this painting that has a woman being stabbed in a park is the cause of all this somehow. Like, the painting is of it's a painting based on actual events, and it's the killer in that painting. She was attacked at some point in her life, and then when she saw this painting of her being attacked, she identified with the killer for some reason and not herself in that painting. One thing that bugs me in horror movies is when women don't put up a fight, like, at all. They're not flailing around, like swinging their fists or kicking their legs. Like this woman, the fourth victim, she's on her bed smoking, and then she looks over, there's the killer, and it's the wife doing this kill, and her arms are free and her legs are free. She's like not struggling at all, and she's just sitting there and taking it. And it looked like she was gonna get stabbed in the vagina. It was kind of implied. I'm not sure where she got stabbed. We don't see her body later on, but the killer takes this girl's panties and rips it off, and then we see the knife going down there. So I think she got stabbed in the vagina. Very, what have you done to Solange, That movie has all kinds of vagina stabbings. We meet this pimp with a stutter. He keeps saying the word so long so that he won't stutter. But it's funny, when he first meets this guy, he sits down and, talks to him, and the guy responds by saying so long. And he thought he was telling him basically to fuck off, like, goodbye. So he just gets up and leaves, like, okay, so long. Then we get this scene where there's an assassin who's hired by the husband to kill or scare Sam. And what I like about this scene is, like, the first half of it, Sam is being chased by this assassin. And then the second half of the chase is Sam chasing the assassin. He's like following him through the streets, trying to figure out where he's going. And we see the assassin later on killed. I'm not sure how he died, but he looked like he was like folded wherever he was. It was a tight space. Like, what the hell happened to him? The fifth victim in the movie is this woman who is walking up into her very dark apartment building. The killer cut out the lights, and she gets in like this telephone booth. And this is probably the only somewhat stylish kill in the movie. It's just the knife going towards the camera a bunch. I feel like Argento's done that in a movie after this, or maybe I'm thinking of Fulci, New York Ripper, knife towards the camera. But there's a moment during this kill where the audio just cuts out, and I'm not sure if that was just a mistake, like the transfer I was watching, if that was just Amazon Prime's version, or if that's actually the movie. Maybe, I don't know, if that was intentional, why that choice to cut out the audio where her scream is just silenced for just a second and then she starts screaming again. We meet this private detective named Faina, who's very paranoid. He thinks this guy's place is bugged, so everything he's saying it because of that. So instead of answering honestly, he says the opposite. So when he's like, "So you're gonna call me?" He's like, "Never," or something like that. "When can I expect to see you?" He's like, "Never," and then he like whispers like, "Maybe tomorrow morning." And then he records the killer's phone call, and he catches some foreign bird sound in the background. They find out where this bird is, and because of that, they're able to locate which apartment building is where the killer's at, and it's in that moment that they hear Monica, the killer, screaming. Like, what a convenience. Like, what a coincidence. Like, they get there at the zoo, they find the bird, so they're like, all right, it has to be one of these buildings, and then that's when the screaming starts, and they're like, they're like, wow, great timing. So Sam goes and meets this very isolated, reclusive artist who is living off of cats, and he says he's the one who painted that very macabre painting, and he knew the person being attacked in that photo and said that the attacker in that photo went to an asylum for life. And then Sam leaves the place in a hurry because he's disgusted by this guy's lifestyle and the fact that he just fed him cat without him knowing it. But if he just stuck around and said, "Oh, that woman in the photo, well, what was her name?" he could have gotten the killer's identity right then. Then we get this kind of intense scene with the girlfriend, Julia, being attacked by the killer, and she's pretty smart. She barricades the door, she grabs a weapon, and starts aggressively like fighting back, stabbing at the door. I liked that. And this is when you can see that the killer is clearly a man, in this scene at least. This is the husband, and what I can't believe is that they actually stayed there another night. Right after this attack, the boyfriend, gets there in the nick of time, and the killer runs off, and they just sleep there another night. Like, I would get the fuck out of there. So Sam and the police, they catch, Monica and her husband fighting, struggling once again, just like at the beginning, and, he takes the blame. He's admitting that he's the killer, he did it all, my wife is innocent. He falls out the window, and we get this interesting POV that goes towards the ground, but then there's a split second where it like bounces back up. So that felt like a bit of an error. Like, what the hell? Like, it should have just cut a second sooner. And while the husband was dying, the wife ran off, and Sam's girlfriend and his friend chased her, and then we see that Julia is tied up and gagged for some reason. I'm not sure why the killer is keeping her around. And what's funny is this fake out reveal. They make you think for a split second that his friend, I think his name was Carlo, is the killer, because you see him in a chair with a knife in his hand, and he's got this really creepy, sinister smile on his face, like he's up to something, or he's crazy. And then his body just falls forward. He's got a knife in his back. So the killer staged his body in a chair holding a knife to just make him look suspicious, just as a little joke. And then this is when the killer steps out of the shadow. It's the wife, Monica. And she's got this evil laugh that she keeps doing. She's not very talkative. She's not saying anything really. She's just smiling and laughing. She even like puts her fist on her hips like it was me, you know. And then she like pushes that big thing with spikes on top of Sam, and conveniently none of the spikes go through him, but that's how the killer should have been killed. That was a missed opportunity. So yeah, the cops arrive. They somehow put it together that it was actually her, even though the husband just gave his full confession on his, his dying breath. And they say, he was like, "How did you guys know?" And the cop was like, "It was Julia, your girlfriend." But she was just tied up. When did Julia give the police information? We just saw her not even a minute ago tied up and gagged upstairs. So when did she go to the police and tell them, "Hey, it was Monica"? How did she get free? I don't understand it. Like, explain it to me. What did I miss? I even rewound it. I'm like, okay, Julia's here. She's tied up and gagged. No one's freeing her. How did she get free to go run off and tell the police, "Hey, it's Monica over here"? Like, she would have had to tell them, I guess, earlier, but no, that doesn't make sense because they would have just arrested her and not believe what the fucking husband was saying. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense. How the hell? Doesn't make sense. All right, so then we get this exposition from the doctor, very psycho, explaining to the TV audience, like, oh, she was identifying with the killer in the painting, not her in the painting for some reason, and the husband was so madly in love with her that he was just trying to cover up her crimes and kill Sam so that she could get away with her crimes and yada yada. But while all this information is being spoon-fed to you, we have all this footage of the airport, different airplanes arriving, and Sam and his girlfriend are on the plane. And it's like, what? Like, just why? Why is all this necessary? The way it was all thrown together was just very messy. I didn't like it. But yeah, that's the end of the movie. What are your thoughts on Bird with the Crystal Plumage? Is it your favorite of the Animal Trilogy? Is it your favorite Argento film, period? Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you like what you've seen here, you can hit this like button and become a subscriber today just by clicking on my cartoon face in about 5 seconds. And remember, it's all an opinion. You don't need to get butthurt about it.